Hi, and welcome back. In this video, we're going to cover part one of the arrangement view. We're going to go over all of the details of everything that we have surrounding the arrangement view and what all of these controls are for. So the arrangement view in Studio One is not unlike the arrangement view in many other digital audio workstations. We have a timeline, we have events on a timeline, and we have tracks. And generally, the arrangement view is where you will work when you set up recording or working with virtual instruments. So within a track, if I select a track, this button I opens and closes an inspector panel. And this inspector has two panes. This is properties that are related to the track itself. And the second one is properties that are related to an individual audio event. Now within the track itself, we have basic controls like here we can set the color for the track to this palette of colors, very simple. We have the mute solo buttons on the track. This is the volume slider. This is record enable. And this is the input monitoring for recording. Track mode between a mono track and a stereo track. And then this control is related to setting groups on the track. So if we wanted to group multiple tracks together, we can set that here. Now you can resize a track vertically by grabbing and pulling up and down along this edge. And you can zoom in and out by grabbing and pulling right in the timeline area like this. Now, this plus sign is what we use to add tracks. If I click that, I get a track dialog. I can choose between a mono stereo, an instrument, or an automation track, and then pick from a variety of presets to set up the track. And now I have a new track. You can also use this and add several tracks at once. So if I say I want to get 3 guitar tracks, I'm going to hit Control Z or Command Z rather to back out of that. And I'm going to delete this extra track with Shift T. So this is the button for importing files. Now normally I would drag files from the browser or from the desktop to get them into Studio One, but this pulls up a dialog that allows you to browse through your file system and import files that way. This next button opens and closes automation or envelope editing on the selected track. So if I select a track and click this button, you can see now I've got my volume envelope here is ready to be edited. Now this button here with the watch on it opens and closes the tempo track. You can see that our tempo is currently set to 80, but if we wanted to put a tempo change in, we can put a little cut with the cut tool right here. And now if the play cursor is here and I make a change to the tempo, like make it 90, you'll see that from this point on, the tempo is 90. So that's how you put in a tempo change and adjust the tempo. There's also additional ways you can do that by just grabbing and dragging. Now this opens the marker track where you can insert markers along your song. And you insert the markers by putting the playback cursor wherever you'd like, and then you hit this plus and it puts in a marker. If you double click on the marker, you can name that marker, like with a song section like chorus, for instance. You can move the marker around by just dragging it around. And we have controls down here where we can increment through markers with these controls. We'll get to those in a little bit. So the marker is a very handy way to navigate your song. So that's the main thing we've got going on in the body of the arrangement area. So now let's continue exploring along the top toolbar area of Studio One. Now starting here, these are related to the control link feature of Studio One, very innovative way to map hardware to internal software controls. So here's kind of the way this works. If I manipulate a control, like say this volume, you'll see that it responds up here and tells us what it is. And then over here, I'm going to turn a hardware knob on one of my controllers, and you'll see that it picks it up and that I can control that. If I do a different one, now I'm on Control 4. This is on an external control surface. So now that we've identified these two controls, this button will link the two together. So now if I go back to that control, you'll see that I'm now controlling this volume on the drums track. So we can use this throughout Studio One, and it's a very powerful feature. If I click this, it will open this volume automation on the track instantly. I can close that here with this button that we talked about earlier. And this allows you to take any automation parameter that appears here, because we've manipulated the on-screen controls, and we can drag it into an automation track in our project. So it creates a very handy way to quickly get automation set up, ready to go on any track. Now, the next area is extremely important in Studio One. These controls are the mouse tools for Studio One, and we can click on each of these and select them from these buttons. And it's really important also to know the hotkeys for these. To get directly to them is the number keys in sequence on the keyboard. So, and this is on the main part of the keyboard by your left hand. And this will be very familiar to Cubase users, because Cubase has a very similar feel to it, and some of these controls work in a very similar way. So if you hit 1, it's the arrow tool, 2, it's this range tool, 3 is the split tool, and so on. So just a quick overview of what these do. We will be covering these later when we get into editing. If I use the select tool, then I can grab events like this and move them around within the arrangement. I can drag them to new tracks, or I can drag them around on the track. Also, there are a variety of handles on individual events. And so you can drag these to manipulate fade-ins on an event. And this will manipulate the shape of the fade-in curve or the overall volume of the event. Now, the range tool allows you to take segments out of an individual audio event. If I select by dragging across with the range tool, I can then pull that audio out and create a new event without any additional other cutting. It's a very powerful tool. So I can even go into one that I've just done and then drag a piece of that out. And then I'm using Control Z to back out of all of these edits. So that's the range tool. Now the split tool will separate any audio event into two pieces at the point that I click. So I'm going to click right here at bar 2, and you'll see that now I've separated this into two events. And I can separate as much as I want. And again, it's an extremely handy tool to cut up the audio. In this particular case, I've got a drum part. So I can split this up into various sections, which then I can use the next tool, which is the erase tool, and maybe take pieces of it out that I don't need to create an effect. Or in the case of maybe comping a vocal, you might take out the pieces that just didn't sound good. So I created a sort of a chopping effect by deleting a variety of these clips. So that's the erase tool. This is the paint tool. The paint tool is most often associated with automation. So let's go back into an automation view, and I can paint in automation. In this case, it's a volume automation. And the automation has a variety of optional tools, like I can use this parabola tool if I want a different shape, or here's a triangle tool if I want to draw in triangles, different kinds of other waveforms that you might want to do. Very, very creative and powerful tools. And then this transform tool, which I've never seen anything else like this. If I wanted to do say I have a crazy automation going here, and I want to do an offset of this, I can put the transform tool around it, and now I can drag up and down, increase the overall volume, or even trend this up. Just really, really interesting things we can do with the transform tool. Very unique, powerful tool in Studio One. So we'll turn this back off. And then this is the mute tool. Very similar to the erase tool, but it doesn't actually remove the event. It just turns the sound off on the event. The erase tool also can be used in sort of a painting fashion. So if you had a series of events that you want to mute, then you can just sort of drag this across and paint them all. So that's a summary of the mouse tools. Now, as we move along the toolbar area, the next thing is the info view. If we open that up, we'll see in this area, which is currently blank, it shows hints on what additional modifier keys are available to do different actions with events that appear in the arrange view. But just for instance, if you look, it says range tool. If I hold down command, that would be control on the PC. So I've got a pointer tool, but if I hold down command, then I get a range tool without even switching tools. So this is kind of powerful because you can be in doing basic editing and think, okay, I want to pull this beat out. I just hold down command or control, select that one, and I'll pull it out, and I didn't even have to change tools. Now the next series is related to quantize and snap. All of these things here are related features. This quantize setting does a couple things. One, it has some influence on the way that the time divisions show up in the ruler section of the timeline. So you see if I click here and I'm on an 8th note quantize and I go to 16th, then I'll get more divisions along the timeline, which might help me line up data if I'm moving it around. Now, the quantize level is mostly used in relation to various quantize features. So say I select some events and say quantize the event starts, it will use this value to determine the quantize setting. So let's just listen to what I've got here. All right, so there's kind of a stuttered effect beat, but it's set to even 16th note. So we're going to add some swing. So I'll pick a 16th with 60% swing as my quantize setting, which appears here. And now I'll right click and do quantize event starts. And now I'll play that back. So you can see that that has quantized that. Now quantize can be used for all kinds of things, from correcting timing to applying different kinds of feel to your events. But that's just one example of how we'll use quantize. We can also use that for instrument parts. We'll just set that back. Now, this set of settings here is related to how snap works. Currently I have snap on. Typically, snap is used to help you when you're arranging to guide your parts to match the musical time or to match up with the bars of the song. So you see as I drag this clip around, it will snap to quarter notes, 8th notes, or to the nearest bar. Now there's some control you have over that, like if we can set it to the bar mode, or we can set it to quantize, which means the snap is going to be influenced by this quantize setting. However, a lot of times you just leave it on adaptive snap, and the snap will adjust depending on how far you're zoomed in. So if you're really zoomed in close, in this case, I can freely move the clip, but if I'm zoomed out, then I snap to the nearest division. You can also set this to frames, which will help you if you're in a video or film situation. So normally I leave this on adaptive, but sometimes I'll set it to quantize if I want a little more control over what it's doing. Now the time base, if you're working with music, is often set to bars so that your ruler shows individual measures of music. However, you can also set this to seconds depending on the kind of project you're working on. You can set it all the way down to the sample level, or even set it to frames if you're working in video. Now we'll just set this back to bars. We'll set this to adaptive. And you turn the snap feature on and off here. With snap off, I can freely move events around in the timeline. But with snap on, you'll see that they'll click to the nearest time division. Now this feature is the follow song. It's really whether or not the display will scroll along with the playback cursor. So here you see that the play cursor's on screen, but now it's not. And it will go across the screen and it will disappear off the screen. Unless you have this on, then Studio One will keep following the playback cursor wherever it goes. Now this one is called follow edit position, and it's almost easier to demonstrate than to try to explain. If I grab a event, you'll see that the playback cursor follows that event, and so it's ready to play it back at any point. It gives you great tools for auditioning, and later on you'll see that there's another use for this because it will help with alignment when we have the edit view open. This is the video window. With the video window, we can drag in video, extract audio from video, And really, that's what it's for. It will also play back time synchronized. If once you're playing back, it will keep the video in this window time synchronized to your audio, your playback material that is in Studio One. So it's a great feature if you're working with audio and video. Now, moving along, to complete this area are just buttons to get us to the start window, the song. If you have multiple songs open, you can pick from them with this little arrow. And if you have a project open for the mastering solution, you can go to that project with this button. Now, the project window, if there is no project open and you click this, it will prompt you to create a new project. So that completes the top half of the arrangement view. And in the next video, we're going to cover the transport and the controls along the bottom half of the arrangement. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you in the next video.